Let me just start off by saying that if you don't have a child named after Todd McFarlane, then you really can be considered a true fan. My next 5 children will all be named after Todd McFarlane. Even if I happen to have a girl, that's just the way things are. That's how hardcore of a fan I am. But really, guys, all jokes aside, I actually wanted to make a video where we kind of talk about some of the stuff that I feel like McFarlane needs to work on a little bit, or just features that I think he could give us a little bit more of. And that's what today's video is all about. We're going to be talking about the top 5 things that we still need from McFarlane. Some of these things he's already given us to a certain extent, but we just need just a little bit more from the line as a whole. So let's get straight into number 5 without further ado. I'm going to try to hold back on the rambling because I tend to do that from time to time. So at the 5th spot, I decided to put the action figure stands from McFarlane. He has some decent, solid action figure stands, and they do make an appearance here and there from time to time, but I don't think they're as consistent. If he's going to give us a Superman action figure or a Black Adam or a Shazam or any type of figure that has a background of, flying, I just feel like it should be a given, especially when we're talking about the collector's edition line, which is usually a little over $30 or about $30 depending on where you purchase it from. And in some cases you do have to cover for shipping, as we saw with the McFarlane store exclusive wave. So in those cases, I definitely feel like there should be an action figure stand included. It seems like every time I purchase an action figure that does not come with an action figure stand, but I feel like it needs it, I have that dilemma of what figure is actually going to be placed on the stand. It's the equivalent of having to choose a favorite child. It's just a very difficult choice, and I don't expect every single action figure to have a stand. Obviously, some action figures or some characters from the DC universe don't really require stands, but I feel like it should be way more consistent, and any figure that has flight poses should definitely include an action figure stand. Let's move on to the 4th spot, and this is actually a topic that I covered pretty extensively a few months ago on the channel. I made a video specifically talking about the potential army building possibilities from McFarlane, and I still feel like that is something that he could definitely work on. It would be great to have like some Joker henchmen, maybe some of those Brainiac bots from the comic books. Honestly, the possibilities are endless because the DC universe definitely has some very iconic armies. So hopefully McFarlane is able to take advantage of that. It's definitely a special moment when an OM allows you or gives you the opportunity to army build. I think maybe the closest that they've gotten to that is giving us those Earth 22 Robins, if I'm not mistaken, but even those weren't really an army. I believe there were only like 3 to 4 different Robins that went with the Batman Who Laughs. In most cases, when you're talking about army building, you might just have to change a few things here and there. You can probably use the same body mold, just have like different head sculpts in some cases. So it's not only something that the fan base as a whole has been asking for quite some time, but it's also something that makes sense from a business standpoint. Only time will tell if he's willing to take advantage of such a great opportunity. Our 3rd spot is pretty straightforward. I would love to see more effect pieces from McFarlane. Now, we usually get, at least with most figures, we usually get a decent amount of like extra hands. He always gives us a solid amount of extra like battle accessories. For example, with Batman, we've become accustomed to seeing a lot of the same old accessories. Same thing with, for example, the Green Lantern action figures, so on and so forth. But for example, up to this point, we have not received a Heat Vision Superman effect piece, maybe like a visor that kind of gets ported onto Superman's head sculpt or something along those lines. Maybe a Batarang with like a trail of air behind it, kind of to simulate Batman flinging the Batarang, or maybe a grapple hook with the actual hook shooting out of the barrel. Now, it is worth mentioning that there are a lot of third-party vendors who are selling this type of product. They'll usually sell like maybe a handful of these accessory pieces from anywhere between the lines of like $15 to $20, whether that's eBay or Amazon. But it would be really nice to receive something like that from McFarlane. We have seen other OMs try to give the customers some effect pieces, and they have, for the most part, been very well received. And I feel like they would be even more welcomed if they were included in the collector's edition line, which I know I've already mentioned a couple of times, but it does feel like for the most part, some of the figures in that line are a little bit lacking when it comes to some extras that are thrown in there. So hypothetically, if they threw in an action figure stand, a couple of effect pieces, and maybe like 3 to 4 different pairs of hands, it would definitely add way more value, and it would kind of excuse that new $29.99 price point from McFarlane. At the second spot, I decided to put wired capes in here, and I know that recently we've been receiving more and more cloth goods from McFarlane, and the wired capes are just a perfect addition to that, but we have seen them be incredibly scarce. We've only received a handful of figures that featured wired capes, and in some cases a lot of these are very difficult to acquire, not to mention the insane amount of figures that have been released that could very much have benefited from having wired capes and they did not. So it's just one of those things that, again, I don't expect every single figure to have wired capes. I'm sure that there are a lot of figures that probably will never have them just because of budgetary constraints, but I really do hope that we start to see the wired capes be more of a consistent thing, especially when he decides to give us cloth capes, which are great, but at least to me it seems like an incomplete addition from McFarlane. So hopefully he starts to give them to us a little bit more consistently. We did, for example, just see the first appearance Batman get the wired cape, and I have to say it looks absolutely phenomenal. A wired cape will definitely add like an extra layer of dynamic presence in your display, and I just feel like they will look so much better than a normal cloth cape, especially if you're big into action figure photography. So as I mentioned earlier, we have already gotten a few figures with the wired cape, so it's only a matter of just being more consistent with it, and I think most of the fan base will definitely appreciate the extra effort from McFarlane. If you've made it this far, you deserve a round of applause, a high five, maybe an award of some kind. I'm totally kidding. You've done absolutely nothing. You're probably just sitting in your underwear, scratching your nutsack, and probably just eating like Dorito Cool Ranch or something. But in all seriousness, I decided to put Unmasked Headsculpts as our top spot for today, the thing that we most want from McFarlane. And this is yet another one of those entries that we have technically already received, but very sporadically throughout the line. I believe the first official wave to have Unmasked Headsculpt literally just came a couple of months ago with that digital Build-A-Figure wave. But as I said, with the previous entries, we just need it more consistently, more unmasked head sculpts with some of these figures. For example, we don't really have like an iconic comic book style Bruce Wayne head sculpt, maybe a more generic Barry Allen unmasked head sculpt, or maybe just give us different options for figures. For example, like an angry Superman with some bright red eyes, or maybe like a chill Superman with just kind of like a half smile or a half smirk. You know, just give us different options when it comes down to displaying our action figures. That's been something that McFarlane has definitely fallen short, and especially now that he's risen the price point for a lot of these. As I know I continue mentioning this, but the collector's edition line is a perfect opportunity for him to continue giving us alternate head sculpts or unmasked head sculpts, depending on which character it is that he's releasing. Honestly, this isn't a bash video. I know I've kind of been tearing into McFarlane recently. This is just kind of me wanting a little bit more from McFarlane overall from the lines that he's working on, but I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. Most of the items that I mentioned on today's list, they've already come out from McFarlane. He's already released them. I just feel like we need a little bit more consistency, and we need them to be more widely available through his multiverse line. But again, as I always say, this is just my personal opinion, my personal take. Let me know down below what top 5 things you guys would like to see from McFarlane. What are some things that you still feel like he needs to work on to really perfect the line as a whole? Let me know down below. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, if you guys enjoy this type of content, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, stay tuned. We are uploading consistently at least 2 to 3 times a week, so stay tuned. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you.